Good evening. What's happening, everyone? Welcome to Elite Encounters. This is Patrick. I play the character of Barnabas, and you're tuning in to Barnabas Brushes here on the Elite Encounters channel on Twitch. We're here for Barnabas Brushes every Wednesday night at 5 p.m. Eastern Time to paint miniatures for our other role-playing game campaigns, our RPG games. They are every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time every week right here on Twitch. So I would like to real quick give a shout out to our elite. That's our subscribers that are out there supporting the channel. We love you and appreciate you. We're happy that you're out there doing what you do to support us so that we can do what we do to try and entertain you. Before I get started with the painting here, I do have a few announcements that I'd like to make. So first of all, as you may have seen last night, for the next, well, 2 more weeks, we're going to be doing a very special Starfinder Second Edition playtest on our Tuesday night role-playing game show. I'll be the GM for those couple shows, just to try out those new Starfinder rules. Hey, what's up over there, Elite Encounters? Welcome. Yeah, it was. I had a blast. I don't know about everyone else. I think we all had fun. It seemed like we had a great time. And, what a fun game. What a weird kind of setting to start things off. But, man, we just had a great time trying these new characters with these new rules that are completely compatible with Pathfinder Second Edition, which is the rule set we use for our regular games. So it was kind of easy to kind of dip our toes in the new Starfinder rules. But there were some new things to learn. Definitely some new character abilities, some new weapons, new spells. It was a great time. We'll see what happens. I can't promise that everyone will make it out alive. Um, but that's okay because we have our other shows to fall back on. So that was the first kind of announcement was that we'll be doing that Starfinder playtest for the next couple Tuesdays. Hey, well, greetings. Welcome aboard. The next announcement I'd like to make is our push to 200 followers here on Twitch. So from now until the end of August, we're slowly building momentum. We're getting close to that 200 followers goal. So if you haven't already, click that follow button. If you're really liking what you see here, click that subscribe button and help us out. But if we hit that 200 followers by the end of August, we have 2 sets of Crystal Cast dice that were Gen Con 2024 exclusives this year. We managed to pick a couple of those up for you guys. We'd like to hit that goal so that we can pick 2 people at random out of our follower base. That was 200 people. So hey, that's not bad odds compared to a lot of other contests out there. Actually 2 lucky winners out of those 200 at random will be chosen to be sent those Gen Con 2024 exclusive dice sets. This year they were really cool jade green dice sets with the Gen Con 2024 logo on the D6. If you haven't seen them, you can check out the Twitch replay of our Starfinder show last night. We showed them on air. Also last week, Barnabas Brushes, we had those up on the painting table with some real nice close-up camera shots of those dice sets. So by all means, hit that follow button. Tell your friends, tell your family members, everyone you know to click follow. And if they win and they don't like dice, tell them to give them to you. There's no harm in that. Anyway, that's announcement number 2. Announcement number 3. We are going to be at PopCon Louisville this weekend. That's the 23rd, 24th, and 25th of this month down in Louisville. Friday and Saturday, we have a couple of special events, these audience participation events that are kind of like a battle royale, if you will. Everybody who comes to play, you can log in, you can sign up, sit down with us, get a character, and it's a free-for-all bar fight brawl. Last one standing each session, both Friday and Saturday, will win a 3-day pass to Louisville PopCon in 2025. So if you're coming this year, next year you might get a shot of going free. So stop by, give us a try, and have some fun and sit down and play with us. Also on Saturday and Sunday at PopCon, we'll be hosting two 4-hour live play role-playing game sessions, some Pathfinder sessions that are going to be some special campaign editions of our Pathfinder show. So I hope to see you guys down there. We hope to see you guys down there at PopCon Louisville. Barnabas, unfortunately, won't be there for this convention, but a lot of us will be. So come on down. I think those are it for the announcements that I wanted to make at the top of the show. Like I said, I want to thank everybody out there that's watching. If you haven't already, hit the like, the follow, the subscribe, everything you can. Our links to our YouTube channel for past shows, you can catch up on that. And if you don't have time to sit in front of a screen and watch us play, we do have our Soul Severed campaign now available as a podcast on all of your favorite listening platforms. So catch up on the early episodes, caught up in the story, and get to where you can be watching us live and be caught up on the show. Or just listen to us on a long drive, a long commute to work, or while you're sitting down painting miniatures. Speaking of miniatures, last week we finished up the figures from this Epic Encounters Arena of the Undead Horde miniature set. This is a kit produced by Steamforged Games. They produce a number of miniatures kits that come with a whole bunch of miniatures or one really big, cool boss monster miniature. A little booklet with encounters in it to run in your role-playing game, and also a really cool flip mat that you can use in your encounter. The rules are written for a different RPG than what we play, but they're easily convertible to Pathfinder. So if you're a Pathfinder fan like we are, you can check these out from Steamforged Games. But they do make some really cool sculpts. I've been a really big fan of this particular set so far. Last week we finished up the Iron Skull Leonites. There are two of those in this set. So we finished up Good Kitty, Bad Kitty. Well, almost finished up, I should say. So this one was the first one we did with kind of these green glowing eyes. Just a really cool sculpt of the skeletal kind of saber-toothed cat with all kinds of skulls and chains on it. It is a large size creature. We did get close to finishing up the second model. And when I say close, that's because last week Sunshine wanted to do a red eye glow, if I remember right, on this particular figure. So we'll do that here in just a minute. Before we jump into doing the eye glows, I wanted to talk about the next figure that everyone kind of in the chat voted on last week to paint. That was this monstrosity here. This is a huge, well, it's still a large size miniature. It's still a 2-inch diameter base. So it's going to be equivalent to a large creature in Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons rules. But this is kind of the boss monster of the kit, if you will. This is the Iron Skull Andabata, if I'm saying that right. I have no idea. I've never heard of that creature. But this Andabata, this large-sized skeleton. If you look at this guy, so he's a big skeleton with this massive cloak on. One of his shoulder armors looks like it's made out of a medium-sized human skeleton that still has its armor on. And then he's got this massive two-handed weapon that it looks like he's almost using like a handheld catapult of sorts to throw big globs of undead flesh onto people. So it looks like a big boulder made of bones that it's just shoveling at people. It could be a nasty ranged attack that has maybe a disease effect or something wicked like that. I don't know. You'd have to check out the encounters design in the book, or, if you like the model and you just build it for your own encounter. Very cool model. There are two of these in the kit. As you can see, they come in this, it's a plastic figure that's molded into this kind of bone-colored or off-white colored plastic. And the way we're going to paint these, I'm a big proponent of the Army Painter Speed Paint line because I have tons and tons and tons of unpainted miniatures that I need to get on the table. And sometimes if I have an encounter that I don't have a miniature for, I got to run to the store, grab a miniature for it, and paint it fast so I'm ready for my next game session. And when that happens, I rely on speed paints because they get the job done quick. In order to really lay down effective speed paint on your models, the first thing that you're going to want to do is prime them, especially if they're plastic models. For me, I prime all my miniatures now. And the technique I use to prime them is a what's called slap chop or grisaille method. And the way that works is you start off with a dark uh, shadow tone. I usually start off with black, but you can work with like a very dark brown or other like very deep dark red, depending on the tone you're going for in your miniature. Various earth tones or flesh colors that you can speed paint over the top of. Because the idea is once you lay down that shadow, you're going to heavily dry brush your mid tone and like a gray or the middle tone of what you're building up, ultimately ending up with a very light colored or white highlight dry brush to kind of create this gradient of shading in the under prime, in the under paint that speed paints will go over. Speed paints are translucent paints that have heavier pigments that will settle down, and the darker pigments will go into those shadows, and the very light colored pigments will be a lighter pigment itself, so it'll lay on top and give that gradient effect that matches what you did in that grisaille prime. Whew, that was a lot to say. So looks like Lenny's checked in. Hi, Lenny. How's it going? Uh, yeah, lucky for you, none of these models will appear in my Starfinder game that you're aware of. Maybe. Of course, had to grab a drink. Hey, Case, welcome aboard. Yeah, I hope you caught the Starfinder show last night. I know you're busy with your own stuff, but if you get a chance, check that out on the Twitch replay because we had a blast. I think we laughed about 30% of that episode. But welcome to the showcase. As always, we appreciate you popping by. Love what you're doing down there. Um, so let's, I guess, get started on the glowing eyes that Sunshine used her channel points to make me. Looks like we're going to paint these with red glowing eyes. Okay. So for that purpose, well, the cool thing about speed paints, especially the 2.0 formulation, is once you have allowed it to dry and cure on your model, looks like my green screen's really freaking out. Once you've allowed it to cure, with a 2.0 speed paints, you can paint over the top of them without the risk of them reactivating and getting wet again and bleeding into your new color. So with that, we should be able to start laying down our red glowing eyes. Because I can paint over the speed paints. Yeah, that's right, Frank. My cat's decided to uh, interrupt the stream to let me know he doesn't like the food I just gave him, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to use a acrylic paint. I'm going to use a Formula P3 paint. This bottle is really beat up. I transfer my Formula P3s into dropper bottles. This is the Scorn Red color. I'm just going to put a drop on a wet palette. For my acrylics, I like to use a palette that has a wet sponge with some like parchment paper or wet palette paper. Army Painter makes one of the best wet palettes I've ever used, in my opinion. Um, it really keeps the moisture in. It seals up. It's got a nice kind of band that goes around it and seals the clamshell case shut, so the wet palette stays nice and wet for long working periods. You can open it back up after days and still have workable paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into those eye sockets, and each eye socket, it's hard to tell. Maybe I can get it on camera here, but there are two eyes in each eye socket for some reason on this creature. It's a four-eyed lion, just like me. So I'm going to go in with my red on a very fine tip brush, and I'm just going to put a dot into those eye holes there. And it's okay if I overshoot a little bit because to establish the glow, I'm going to do some glazing, which is basically painting watered down red around the eye sockets to kind of create a glow effect. Okay, so I've got the eyes colored in with my base of red. Oh, so now I'm going to really water down that paint and create a glaze. Um, Glaze is going to take your pigment and water it down, not quite to like a wash, but more like maybe a skim milk kind of consistency or texture. Uh, Maybe like a watered down skim milk even. And then we're just going to kind of brush that, especially on the lower kind of cheekbones here, because that's where the glow is coming out, right? That's is onto that cheekbone. It's probably not going to reach up over the socket onto the eyebrows or forehead, but more going to shine out downward. Maybe a little bit here on the snout, especially on those cheekbones. So that's just the eyes casting color on anything they're shining out on. Okay, now what I'm going to do to represent like these eyes are glowing, shining, right? So I've got this base red, so I want to kind of have a very bright color in the center of the eye to kind of show where the light is the brightest coming out of the eye. So it's got this kind of aura of red around this bright spot. For that, I'm just going to use this little point of yellow. And I want to try and get this right on the focus point of the eye. That is way too much. So the cool thing about acrylics, because they are water soluble, you can, if you make an error, you can easily correct it pretty quick. But now I got to let that socket dry out. So I'm going to go in with actually this yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, make it a little bit brighter. I think we're going to go strictly white. Just a little dot of in that eye there. And then where I overshot, I can always just paint over that with some of that red from earlier. A little more glaze on there. So yeah, now he's got some red glowing eyes. A little bit more over here on this cheek. I'm going to rub it off of this high point here. I don't think it would reach that. While it's still wet, you can still work it. Okay. So a little bit of red glow to the eyes there. You guys hearing this poor mournful cat complaining about his food? Can you guys hear that out there? Let me know. Okay, we'll set that up off to the side to dry for a little bit, and I'll close up my wet palette so that doesn't dry out. Like I said, it's got this little sealing band I can put around it to keep the moisture inside. And I think we'll pretty much call those Iron Skull Leonites done. So that being said, I think we're ready to move on to the big boss Iron Skull Andabatas. So this is again what it comes like out of the kit with that kind of bone color. I have taken the second one, and prior to the show, I did a black prime on there. And it looks like he's still kind of wet in spots where the primer is down in the big cracks. Let's see if I can't work that in a little bit more so it dries quicker. If you lay it down too thick, it'll stay wet for a long time. This guy has been primed, like I said, in a black. And for my base coat primes, I always use a polyurethane acrylic mix primer. In particular, the Vallejo line of primers. These have always been my go-to for brush-on priming. One moment. All right, sorry about that. So back to the priming. The next step, once we have this black undercoat prime, is to go with a mid-tone prime And for that, I just use the same Vallejo primer. This is a slightly older bottle, uh, but this is the just plain gray. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of that out in my palette. This one I like to mix up really well to get the consistency I want in the primer. Now for doing this, we're going to do a dry brush technique. The first layer, we're going to do a pretty heavy-handed dry brush, I guess, to create that mid-tone. So we're going to cover most of the model in this gray. And to do that, there are dry brushes out there on the market. Army Painter makes a set of dry brushes specifically for this purpose. There, you can use any kind of flat, larger brush that you have in your brush collection as a painter. For me, some of the best dry brushes that I've been able to grab are just really inexpensive makeup brushes. So I've inherited some makeup brushes from the wife, cleaned them out pretty well, and they've worked well for me as dry brushes. But when those get beat up, and they get beat up pretty fast when you're bouncing them off of plastic models, you can run to any big box retailer and find these for pretty cheap over in the makeup aisle, uh, usually for a couple dollars a piece. It's not too bad. So I got a newer brush this time. Usually I'm using more of a wide, flat kind of brush, like this right here. This one's really been beat up. You can see it definitely needs some work with some brush soap. But this one is brand new, and it's got more of a round bristle set on it, round head, so it's not as flat. And that's kind of what the dry brushes look like when you buy them from a manufacturer specifically for miniature painting. Is kind of more of this rounded head on it. So either one of those will do. But what we're going to do is we're going to load up the brush with some of that mid-tone gray. You guys have seen me do this before, but for any new viewers, I always like to explain it. The sense of sounding like a broken record, at the risk of sounding like a broken record. So load up the tips of my brush like this with some paint. Be careful not to get it up into the metal part, right? That's when the bristles really start flaying out and getting nasty. And then we're going to brush the excess out onto a non-painting surface like a paper towel. And you want to brush all the pigment out. And you can give it a couple really broad strokes and then kind of swirl it around or blend it around, almost like you're doing, your eyeshadow or something. What? Barnabas knows how to do eyeshadow? Yeah, I like doing Halloween makeups and stuff. Uh, okay, so what we're going to do with this is we're going to create basically a top-down lighting effect. So our midtones are going to be heavier on the top of the model as they are than they are going on the lower surfaces. All right, so it looks like there's no pigment or paint on the brush, but once we start applying strokes or slapping the model, slap chopping the model, you'll see that pigment start to grab onto the figure. So just kind of an easy downward stroke. And just kind of gentle at first so you can see how the paint's coming off of your brush. You don't really want to lay into it too hard because you'll start forcing paint down into those cracks and crevices, and that'll defeat the whole point of slap chop because you want to create this gradient of light and shadow, this grisaille method. So already you can see probably on camera how the details of the model are starting to come to life with this technique. This guy has a big old sack on his back, kind of like a weird evil Santa Claus, I guess. Just this massive uh, bag of bones. Probably as ammunition for his bone shovel catapult mace club thing, whatever this weapon is called. It's a pretty unique design. I don't think I've ever seen anything like this uh, in a model, in an undead model. Yeah, he really is starting to come to life here. It's kind of hard to see on camera, maybe, but he has this blindfold on over his eye sockets, but you can make out his teeth just kind of sneering like an open skull smile underneath that blindfold. We definitely want to make sure that personality in our model is captured with this technique. So, all right, looks like I'm losing pigment coming off my brush. It's not really coming off. So we're going to keep applying it a little bit more forcefully, I guess, to work that pigment out. And you'll see it's still starting to lay down over the model surface. A lot of texture here in the base with these stones that this guy is standing on. Okay, give it another dip in that medium gray. And same thing, we're just going to brush it out on our paper towel, swirl it around like we're blending our eyeshadows, because it is, after all, an eyeshadow brush. Work out almost all that pigment so that there's like almost nothing left on the brush. And then back to work. While we're laying this out here, Sunshine, have you, I know we have talked about doing a paint along on the show at some point. I know you've got your model in hand, right? You have it, it's in your possession. I do as well. Have you started assembling your dragon yet? There's a lot of pieces to that. That rocky base is coming alive. There's some big stone bricks in here. It's starting to actually point out some femurs down here in the base. Some really cool detail in these models. They really, the sculptor really put a lot of thought and work into this guy. On these pieces that stick out like this, uh, they can be pretty fragile. So go easy when you're slap chopping down on weapons that are sticking out, or big long arms or limbs or horns on things like dragons or demons. They tend to snap off, especially on your more brittle plastics or resin 3D prints. You're going to want to definitely be careful with that. All right, let's get a little bit in here. One thing we like to do when slap chopping is we can stick our brush in and kind of swirl it, kind of twist it, and that will get some of that gray in there. And if you're nice and easy and have a soft touch, it'll just highlight this stuff that's deep in there. Yeah, let's go, let's see, a little bit more top down here. Smoke over the top of his uh, tarsals and metatarsals. There you go. Yeah, I used a tube of Gorilla Glue, super glue. You can pick that up at, even your grocery store, I think, has Gorilla Glue. Any super glue will work, but Gorilla Glue has been my favorite. It bonds quick, holds firm. Okay, I'm gonna go over the top of his little catapult thing here, supporting it as I do so. I love the fact that he's got a human skeleton with armor for armor on his shoulders. That's just, that's only something an evil character would do, right? Okay, I think we've laid down a pretty good level of the gray mid-tone prime on this guy. You can definitely see a lot of the details coming out. He's got this big, massive, billowing cloak with this sack of bones on his back. And that cloak wraps around to over his shoulders, and it's secured by these kind of leathery straps that go to these metal rings to kind of hold everything closed. The cloak extends below his hips here and billows out underneath him. And he's got this strange weapon with, it's got like some leather wraps on it. Look at this on there. Okay. But I'm pretty satisfied with the gray mid-tone here. Definitely already starting to think about the kind of description you can give as this thing hits the battlefield and is stomping towards you, raising his catapult weapon over his head to lob a uh, big, massive bolus of bones at his enemies, perhaps festering with rotten flesh, crawling with disease. Yes, savage indeed. Yeah, it's like a catapult made out of a rib cage. Yeah, you can see underneath here. Although whoever did this sculpt, I don't know, this must be the back because this looks like vertebrae instead of a sternum. Yeah, it reminds me there was a movie back in the 80s that had Rutger Hauer in it, and there was a castle under siege, and they catapulted a bunch of rotting meat into the castle that was infested and spread plague into the castle. I can't remember what that movie was. Uh, I was but a wee lad when I saw it. Okay, so now that I've laid down the mid-tone gray, it's time to go over it with the highlight. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that makes more sense to use the vertebrae for that base of that catapult because yeah, the sternum is just connected by a bunch of cartilage, right? Eventually that'll rot away. Your whole catapult sucks. What am I talking about? It's a fantasy world. They can do whatever they want. Okay, so again with the prime, uh, now I'm going to use a Vallejo primer. This is just a plain white uh, primer. This is a newer bottle, so I really have to mix this up and suspend the pigments. Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to throw in a little bit of my old high school anatomy classes in there, you know, or college. I had a couple in college. Okay, again, I'm just going to put a little bit into my brush and paint it out onto my paper towel until all of the pigment is off the brush to where I can't really see any pigment left on the brush bristles. Brush bristles. Whew, man. Maybe I talked a little too much last night on our Starfinder playtest game because I am tongue-tied today. Okay, Now I've painted out and blended out my bristles. So now let's see what kind of white lays down. Again, very light top-down strokes at first until we start seeing how this pigment comes off. We don't want to overshadow the gray and basically make this a flat-looking model again. So you want to maintain that detail. It's like there's a metal ring there. There's that metal plate armor on his shoulder. Looks like this guy is still wearing a helmet. All these bones and this backpack thing. Definitely the top of his femur we're going to want to get really good because the light's definitely going to catch that. Again, we want to be careful not to snap off any uh, what are a lot of painters refer to as fiddly bits, right? The little pieces that are sticking off everywhere. So over the top of his toes here. Now the moment of truth, this weapon, just the top surface, we're going to catch with this bright. I'm going to keep holding it, supporting that catapult, so when I brush down on it, I don't snap it off accidentally. Definitely kind of the top edges of those ribs. Now I'm getting a little bit more forceful. I'm going to push a little bit more of this white pigment on these highlights here, especially on this texture on the back. Okay, and we got a little bit left. We can now hit the highlights on this base. Doing a kind of a light stroke across the base just to catch those highest highlights, especially on the edges of these stones. On top of this weird bone thing on his shoulders, top of his skull for sure. And sometimes when I'm doing the slap chop, I just keep laying down this bright highlight, and I just sometimes don't know when to stop and just get to lay in color. But I think right now is that time. Okay, so there we go. There's our Iron Skull Andabata. I think we're ready to lay down some pigment. A little bit more of highlight right here. You could see that, maybe you can't see it, but I can feel it in my fingers. This catapult weapon is very bendy. If I hit it hard enough, it'll snap right off right here in his hand. It'll just break right off. So I'm going to be extra careful working this part of the model here. Okay, and then I'm going to clean this brush out with water. I want all this primer out of my brush before it dries and starts really wrecking my bristles. Your brushes will work for you a long time. They'll serve you well if you take good care of them and clean them out between every color after every session. And then periodically really going to town with some brush soap and getting them nice and clean. Uh, that's one of my weekend projects coming up, is to kind of go through my brushes and brush soap them out. And you can reshape the bristles and kind of reform those tips and shapes of your brush to get them almost back to brand new. Okay, so now that we're ready to start laying down some color on this guy, well, I always start with the bones, right? Because that's obviously the defining characteristic of this model, and there's a lot of bones on here. To do that, I'm going to use my go-to Army Painter color for any kind of skeleton, and that is the Speed Paint Pallid Bone. You guys have seen this at work before, and I want to keep some consistency in this group of models because they're all from the same, faction, right? They're all the Iron Skull undead armies. So if you're painting an army for any of those miniature skirmish games that are out there, using the same color model to model is pretty good to like have some uniformity, and then maybe some defining characteristic paint in slightly different colors so you can identify them on the board. So for speed paints, I don't use a wet palette. You should not keep these wet. They're designed to work off of a dry palette right out of the bottle. You can always thin them. If you do, you don't want to use water. You actually want to use the speed paint medium, which you can get separate. If you buy the kits for any of the speed paints, a lot of times they'll come with a bottle of speed paint medium in the kit. They come in the little bottles, or you can get them in these gigantic, large bottles for big work. Make a nice stocking stuffer for your painters out there with, birthday gift, whatever. So you get with speed paints, you want to give them a good mix. They come with little metal mixing balls in the bottles already to resuspend that pigment in that medium. And you want to have them be nice and well mixed and consistent so that it delivers the pigment as designed. And then for speed paints, uh, a lot of people who use classic layering techniques swear by Kolinsky sable brushes. And I'm one of them. If I'm painting with layers, I prefer to use nice sable brushes, but they run you about $12, $13 a pop. And if you're beating them up fast, then, that's a lot of money down the drain. For speed paints, though, you don't really want to use those expensive brushes. You can go out and you just get yourself a big set of synthetic brushes uh, at any retailer. And there are detail brushes out there that come even with these tiny little detail paint brushes. For these larger areas, I'm probably just going to use more of a brush like this. But yeah, use your cheap brushes with speed paints. Don't wreck your good sable brushes. Save that for your fancy detailed layering paint. Okay, well, let's start off on the most obvious, I think, is his arms and hands. That pops out at me first. We're just going to load up our brush pretty liberally with the paint and just let it flow out onto the model and do what it does on its own. You just guide it where you want it to go. You want to paint only where you want the paint to go, because this does like have a flow improver in the medium, so it definitely will move around on you. And because of the translucency of the paint, if you paint in an area where you don't want the color to be, especially if it's a darker color, it will show through any lighter color speed paints that go over the top of it. Let's get these fingers under here. So that's one arm. Let's do his face here underneath the blindfold. Get that wicked grin to show up. And then the skull over the blindfold. Obviously, try not to touch your paint when it's wet, when you're moving the model around. Okay. Now let's do this arm coming out under the cloak here. Just move the paint around with your brush and let it do the work. Those heavier pigments will flow right into your shadowed part of the model, into the more recessed parts, and the lighter pigment will stay on top. You can paint speed paint really right over a plain white prime. Even miniatures that come pre-primed already in the package, you can paint speed paint right over the top of those. You won't get the gradient that you do over a slap chop, but you know, it's perfectly fine to take these right over a white prime, and those details will still pop out, just not as uh, contrasty as you can get with a slap chop, in my experience. Okay. Still have this part of his arm here. This thumb. It remembers what the bottom two bones in your arm are called. Since we're also doing anatomy class, I guess. There you go. What's happening, Peliquim? Welcome. If I didn't catch you earlier and say hi, hello and welcome to the show. Yes, Radius and Ulna. Yeah. How many miniature painting streams do we have? Interactive education like we do here. Most people are probably like, I'm not here to learn, I'm here to watch paint. Okay. Just getting the majority of the actual creature skeleton done first, because I'm debating whether or not, like, all the other bones on the creature, that like his weapon and the little skeleton that makes up his armor, like if I don't want to paint those in a slightly different bone color, just to have them be set apart from the actual creature himself, right? Otherwise, this whole model will end up being, you know, a large percentage of it anyway, will be this pallid bone color. And that's fine. I mean, that'll make things easy, right? But it might not be as visually stimulating as if, you know, his bones are different from the bones that he's picked up off the battlefield and turned into his uh, armor and weaponry. You're just here to watch paint dry? Okay, well, you came to the right place because things are starting to dry down here where I have painted. Hopefully it's more entertaining than just watching paint dry. Hit his ribs underneath here. This, pelvic girdle. And that slap chop has kind of defined those highlights for me there. They're going to be a little bit darker under where the cloak kind of wraps around the axial skeleton of the creature. So now we've got his legs and his arms and his skull pretty well defined. But what do you guys think out there in chat? Should we do the bones of his weapons and armor in a different color? Give the armor and the weapon a dirty sheen. We could do that. So I was thinking we can do a slightly different bone color, kind of like we did with the Leonite, so that we create a different bone tone. Yeah, there we go, bone tone. And once that's dry, we could go over with like a stippling technique, or take some like mossy green and just kind of stipple in areas to make it look like it's been um, in the ground for a long time. Yep. We can also do some blood spatter. I like that idea as well. Um, Blood spatter, there's a couple techniques that I picked up from watching horror makeup shows, and you can recreate that on miniatures as well. Something as simple as a toothbrush, just kind of doing a flick technique with a toothbrush. You can get some really interesting look at blood spatters. So we'll see about that. But for right now, let's go ahead and let this guy dry down, because we're getting close to the top of the hour. So I will keep that in mind out there, Peliquim and Sunshine and Lenny. I like your guys' ideas. I like what you're thinking to bring this model to life, so that he's not just all this one bone color, right? That would be kind of boring. And obviously, this guy was not sculpted to be boring. So we'll play around with him a little bit more next week, right here on Barnabas Brushes at 5 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Tomorrow, for Thursday, we will not be airing Overwatch's orography and cartographical musings, Overwatch's map show, as I affectionately call it, because he'll be on his way with all of our gear and tech and miniatures and you name it, all the things that we need, the terrain pieces, the cameras, everything we need to bring this show to life at PopCon in a remote location. We'll be down there in Louisville this weekend. Again, 23rd, 24th, 25th. If you got nothing to do this weekend, head on down there. There's lots of stuff going on, but swing by Elite Encounters, sit down and play with us as we do bar fights for bonding. Winners of those free-for-all brawls, those battle royales, will win a free 3-day PopCon badge to PopCon Louisville 2025. Next Tuesday, on Elite Encounters, 6 p.m., we'll have episode 2 of our Starfinder 2nd Edition playtest. I'm really looking forward to that, to see if these guys make it out of the ghost levels alive. Or will they have to create whole new characters to keep playing the playtest? Who knows? And I'm trying to think of what else we got for announcement. Oh, right, the Crystal Cast dice sets. That's the last thing I wanted to talk about. So again, on the push to 200 followers. If you're already a follower here on Twitch, great. We appreciate you. You're already entered in the drawing to win one of those Gen Con 2024 exclusive dice sets. If you have friends and family that aren't subscribed, or you have people who you think would be interested in the channel, let them know. Have them pop in and just give us a follow. It's free to follow. Every person who follows will be entered in that drawing. As long as we hit that goal of 200 followers by the end of August, everyone will be entered to win one of 2 sets of Gen Con 2024 exclusive dice sets from Crystal Cast. So even if your friends, aren't into dice, if they win, have them give the dice to you. That's fair, I think. Anyway, I appreciate you guys coming. Remember to, if you like what you see, follow us here, subscribe. If you could support us on Patreon, we would love it. We would appreciate it. We do put a lot of work into these shows, and we hope that you see the love and effort and blood, sweat, and tears we put into these shows every week. And if you can't catch us live on Twitch, head over to YouTube and watch the replays. The videos on demand drop every Friday on YouTube. You can also watch Barnabas Brushes there and Overwatch's map show. And if you can't sit down in front of a screen, catch us on podcast on all of your listening platforms. The Soul Severed campaign right now is the only thing that's loading up episode-wise onto the podcast. But give us a listen. You know, you got to mow the lawn this weekend. You might as well throw in your earbuds and listen to our show. And while you're there listening to the show, rate it. You know, tell us what you think. Because we always like to apply what we learn from our watchers and our listeners to see if we can't make the show even better for you, because that's what we're here for. Anyway, I appreciate you guys. Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you guys at PopCon if you can make it. And until next week, good evening.